Pastor, theologian, scholar, and regular Good Catholic contributor, Father Jeffrey Kirby, joins Good Catholic's Rachel Shrader on the Truth Be Bold podcast, a fearless, down-to-earth weekly discussion on the topics at the forefront of our Catholic life today.
Greetings, friends. Welcome to the podcast, Truth Be Bold. This is the podcast where we dive right into real issues facing contemporary Christians. What is the gospel calling us to do? How do we remain faithful disciples in the midst of moral questions, social issues? I'm glad you're with us. I'm Father Kirby.
I'm Rachel Shrader.
And we figured today, why don't we just go ahead and dive into the whole question of artificial intelligence? It seems like all of a sudden this has become a really big deal.
Yes, it's being used in various contexts more and more and more and more, I feel like a lot of companies are introducing it in various ways. So I think people are, they're interested in it in the ways that it can improve efficiency, but it's also always been the subject of science fiction novels and movies and things. And it's the, oh no, when is artificial intelligence going to take over the universe? It's always got that kind of duality of, okay, it's a practical thing, it has a practical purpose, but also we're so scared of it because science fiction. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and you know, what's interesting is, truth be just completely, I guess bold, is I had to actually look up exactly what artificial intelligence is because, of course, we're hearing this thing now. It's just all the buzz. And I think, I think I know what that is. But as you're saying, it's so connected with science fiction. It's like I have to make sure that I have a clear grasp exactly what this is. I don't exaggerate or underestimate exactly what artificial intelligence is. And I was both surprised, encouraged, and a little terrified.
Exactly. Sounds about right.
So, for example, I didn't realize that my dentist uses artificial intelligence in the new scanning of teeth and various things. So there's an aspect of our artificial intelligence that's used for that. So in terms of reading the health of a tooth and what needs to be done and various things and so on. So I was like, okay, well, I'm glad for that because I remember back in the 80s growing up as a kid. I mean, dentistry was horrible. It's like, how is this a science, right? And still uncomfortable, but much more pleasant. Well, I never realized that pleasant aspect came because of the development of technology, including AI, in terms of dentistry science. Okay. So it's like, okay, well, that's good. Sense. And of course, across the board, we can look at the developments of medicine, where artificial intelligence is playing a huge part, especially in terms of like surgeries. So anyone who has a surgery, and I usually get to be with people right before that surgery in terms of the anointing of the sick. And now surgeries are much faster, safer, smoother, in large part because of technology and in some areas because of artificial intelligence. So in those areas, neither of us, nor would the church ever say, oh, this is bad and this should stop. Like, no, this is actually something that contributes to human development, to human growth, human community, and by extension, human creativity. Okay, so good. So that's the good stuff. Okay. So consoled, encouraged, and so on. And I think we had to start with that so that we don't get clumped into that group on the periphery. It's like everything that's science is bad and AI is terrible, and RoboCop is right around the corner, and Terminator and various things. It's like,
well, it might be, but we'll get to that.
Well, exactly. We definitely have some concerns. Let me tell you about the stuff that terrifies me and Rachel, your thoughts as well. But I thought we'd start with the affirming that no one's saying that AI doesn't have its place. I mean, the title of this episode is putting it in its place. And in areas where it contributes to human development and it serves the human family, then we would say, yes, of course, right? So that this can be a good thing. All right. But we want to talk about the concerns. First, have you seen AI in a positive light in areas we would say, oh, this is a good use of AI?
I've seen it in certain contexts because this is kind of broaching an area where I think it shouldn't be used in writing. Oh, yes. But in terms of kind of more like boring writing, like kind of stuff that like website copy and like stuff like that you don't really want to do. So I've seen that. Right. So I've seen it in a certain like time saving context in that. But I feel like that still has to be treated with caution because as a writer, I know that even boring writing contributes to your development as a writer, and it contributes to your skill set. So I tend to hesitate to broadly say, hey, any kind of boring writing you should leave to AI. It was well, no. There's a lot of boring stuff that actually contributes to our development as craftspeople, as artists. So I don't feel totally comfortable saying that, but basically it's the similar stuff to what you said in medical field. It's already in so much use in computers. It's like there's like we probably couldn't even begin to describe like how often and how in what context it's used. I don't have enough knowledge of computers to separate the AI from other types of technology, but in like a calculator is basically AI.
Oh yes.
And so there's a lot of uses in the science field, I think, where AI definitely plays a role.
Yeah, the advancement we have. The other day, I just wanted to go get a regular calculator, the old, very simple calculator. And I know it's on my cell phone, but I just wanted one for my kitchen. And I just wanted a simple calculator.
With the buttons? The buttons that click?
Yeah, exactly,
click,
right?
click,
The
click.
little thing. And so, and I went to the store and looking around. Eventually I had to ask someone, and they didn't know. They had to go look it up. And it was in stationery. It was in stationery. I thought, okay, well, because if you're gonna have a calculator because of AI and other technological developments, it's like a small computer. You think it's like something that just fell out of like a NASA space shuttle or something. So yeah, and those areas can be helpful because it allows us to do more things and to be more accurate and keep people safer and stuff. Okay, good. But I will say too, with AI, there amazing progress is made in terms of safety and security, especially with older folks, in terms of anticipating movements and allowing them to call and ask for help and for there to be an immediate reaction in terms of what's needed and stuff like that. Read that AI is involved in that as well, so it's keeping people safe. So, okay, so these are all, and we wanted to start with that affirmation. Okay, and maybe for people who are listening, maybe some aren't as aware as how extensive AI is already being used.
Yes.
And how it's contributing to some really important things and helpful things.
Yes.
Okay, good. So good. Now let's go to maybe the terrifying parts. Wow. Okay. A couple months ago, I was looking for some new black shoes. And it's funny because I always wear the same black shoes, but they're getting harder and harder to find. Okay. And since then, now I think I've been, the recipient of an ad, I think almost every other day for some type of black shoe.
Yes.
All right. Now that's just an annoying part of AI where it's like it's anticipating sale, processes and rhythms and so on and so on. Okay. So maybe someone didn't realize that if you look for something, all of a sudden all your ads are about that and you're getting promotions for something. And so all that is AI anticipating and reading, algorithms of your sales and your interests and stuff like that. Now that's not some of the major areas of concern we want to talk about, but that's just an annoying use of AI. Right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I want a computer to know what kind of shoes I like. And I don't want that computer.
The internet knows everything.
It really does. Sometimes it's, and then it keeps like, well, you might like these type. And it was really scary. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I would like those shoes better.
Sometimes we fall for it.
Right, exactly. And then there's the fear, does this thing actually know me better than I know myself? Right?
Yeah, we are getting into dystopian novel territory at this point in time.
Crazy.
The reformation of the human brain according to the desires of AI.
I'll tell you, like, I think there's a huge room for that type of thought. Is have we reached another level in terms of human evolution, human developments? Like, has our anthropology changed? I mean, it's sad when just on an unrelated topic, but slightly maybe related. Is they're saying now that when a teenager loses their cell phone, they actually begin to hit into a full panic attack, as if someone had just chopped off their arm. And you imagine, I'm of the generation where I'm still what they call a digital immigrant. Okay. So I remember a time we didn't have this. I grew up a time I didn't have an email address. I didn't have a cell phone. Like, we went out and played all day until the streetlights came on. That's how our parents knew where we were, right?
I really want to get the thoughts of our camera guy right now. He's definitely a Zoomer.
He's of a younger generation. But I remember all that. So still kind of a digital immigrant. So I can remember when those weren't a part of life. Like, for example, if we went on a road trip, we would actually have to, break out
Whoa,
maps.
whoa.
You know?
Father Kirby, seriously.
Yeah, I know.
I knew you're old, but
yeah, it's like, that was right when we were done building the pyramids. Right? Yeah. And get this, we actually used to have to actually pull over to use a payphone.
That's impressive.
To call the people we were going to visit or whatever, or if we were running late for a meeting, had to pull over and call from a payphone. You know, and of course, you know, now, you know, the younger generation, they, you know, other than maybe in movies or hearing stories like this from older generations, you know, they don't really know that. So you imagine, you know, that cell phone is everything. And then suddenly it's gone, like it's lost or they've misplaced it or something. And it becomes a real like mental issue.
That's impressive.
Where they hit full like panic attack. They actually like think they're having a heart attack. They have to be taken to emergency medicine and stuff. I mean, it's really, really serious. You know, so that's not directly related to AI, but it just shows us how technology has really shaped and molded how we see ourselves as human beings.
Yeah.
So I think now we're classified as Homo sapiens, and they're saying, have we reached a level that we're Homo sapiens sapiens? Not simply the human being that knows itself, but the human being who knows that it knows itself. Okay.
That's really meta.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We'll let the philosophers deal with that, right? You know, but to our point with AI is that it's there. It's more. It's being used extensively. It's more prominent than what people might realize, and we want to affirm the good things. We want to raise some annoying things. Okay, but there are some authentic concerns about AI. And I know, Rachel, you're an artist and of a classical mind, which we have similar spirits with that. So what are your concerns with AI?
So my concerns are basically that it takes away from the actual human experience of doing something. And while that might seem like just a romantic notion, it's intensely important to the development of an artist to really sit and do the boring things, to do things with your own hands, to do things with your own mind, to fail, to try again, to try different things. And for example, digital art done by AI, some of it's really impressive, like what it can do. It can sometimes do it better than a human can. But what does that do for the human? And I think that's the element that we don't think about. Sometimes we're so product-driven or results-driven that we don't think about the process of getting someplace and what it does for us. And so being an artist, a visual artist, same with music, right? There's a lot of AI created music out there. But it completely robs you of the developmental, the spiritual and like artistic development that you experience when you actually do something for yourself. And that you actually think about how to put something together, how to express something in words or in images or in music. And so for me, robbing the artist of that experience and of that developmental process is incredibly detrimental to the artistic world in general and to the human person in particular, because the artist is no longer something that's coming from their heart. It's no longer something that they're learning from personally. It's no longer an experience for them. It's no longer a form of prayer for them. It's no longer kind of what God has given them to do. It's just purely results driven. Like, if I can get a better result by pressing a button, then shouldn't I just do it that way? And that kind of puts it in the same plane as, doing a calculation. If I can add 15 numbers together, divide them, multiply them, whatever, quickly with a calculator, why should I do it in my head? Well, because it makes you smarter doing it in your head. And there are certain situations where you'll want to do it with a calculator when you're busy, when, in certain situations. But doing math in your head makes you smarter. And making art with your own hands makes you a better artist. And making music with your own ears and your own voice in your own hands, I think makes you a better musician. And so taking away the art from the artist, I think, is the great tragedy of AI when it's introduced into artistic contexts. And it's the same with craftspeople. You could put something into a machine and make a decent, piece of furniture or a decent craft, but you've completely robbed the carpenter of his skill. And so the lack of skill and the lack of connection, I think, to physical things, to art, to craft, I think is hugely detrimental to our brains. I think there's something about creating something, whether it be an art art with a paintbrush, or even with a digital brush, or music, or carving with our own hands, or doing something with our own hands, that tactile experience, I think, is important to us as human beings. And honestly, if you look at people and ask people, I think most people want to get back to that. I think most people enjoy doing something that's very real.
Yes.
And they kind of want to get away from just having something else do it for them. Yes. So that's generally my concern as an artist when it comes to AI.
And I think the point that I draw from what you're saying and think it's spot on is we forget the artificial, the word artificial in artificial intelligence, that, we could say artificial, well, what are some synonyms for that? Unreal, non-authentic, and so on, to, that this, line of thought. And, when we introduce something that's artificial, as you're saying, something human is lost. And there, AI becomes concerning when it supplants the human experience. It supplants something within the human family. So it's not assisting or contributing, it is supplanting. Mm-hmm. And that's where that's things where, things become troublesome and concerning. Because where's the human experience, or the human person, or the tradesman, or the artist? Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, then what are we doing? Are we just sitting on the couch, getting overweight and binging on television shows?
Yep.
Right? You know what I mean? As opposed to, developing the human mind, the heart, entering into relationships. Mm-hmm. Because you describe, the person, the artist, the craftsman, him or herself. Then with that is always a community. Like, former times we spoke about guilds where artisans would get mm-hmm. together, artists would get together, and they would discuss and debate and kind of try to one up each other, which would enhance the art or the trade and so on. Mm-hmm. And we lose all that when it's just push a button and some computer thing, pumps this thing out, and there's again something very human that's lost. Mm-hmm. And eventually we have to ask ourselves, well, what's the purpose of life? We know as Christians to know, love, and serve God. And we know that a part of that means we also know, love, and serve one another, mm-hmm. Made in the image of God.
Correct.
And if that's all taken away because computers are doing things, well, then what are we left to? Because, the idea is that, well, we have this technology to make life easier, so that then as human beings, what? What? There was a former time when we would have said to read literature, to engage in ideas, to have more active community, and so on and so on. But those are now almost dismissed as antiquated things, like, mm-hmm. So then, okay, computers take care of everything, so that the human family can do what? You know what I mean? Like, exactly. What exactly are we supposed to be doing? Okay, getting bored, getting depressed, losing meaning and purpose and mm-hmm. value, and so on. No surprise that we see, outrageous high spikes in suicide and mental and emotional issues.
Right, and the thing, it's amazing how many virtues are lost when we take away the hard things. Do hard things. Hard things are good for you. And all the little virtues that are contained in learning how to do something and working at it and working at it and working at it are incredibly developmental to the spiritual life. Mm-hmm. It takes an enormous amount of patience, and I'm no good at it, to work day in and day out to get better and better and better at something, to really fail at it many times, which every artist does. Like, people like Michelangelo did not spring up out of the ground fully formed. They failed a lot, and they worked a lot to get where they were. Obviously, he was very talented, but he still worked a lot for what he did. And that element of work, I think, is also a huge thing that's lost with artificial intelligence. The patience that it develops, the work ethic, the fortitude when it comes to dealing with boring things, doing something over and over again, and actually having the patience to keep doing it until you start getting better. Yes. It's incredible, the vast just amount of life that's lost.
Yes.
And like you say, for what? And when I address this in one of my articles on the Good Catholic blog, I'm doing a series called The War on Humans that I've mentioned before. And the first one in that series was in praise of inconvenience, mm-hmm. and kind of discussing the idea of convenience and why do we need things to be convenient all the time? For what? Whenever everything in our life is convenient and we focus on that, we just are more and more busy. Like, it's just a beast that keeps wanting more.
Yes.
Like, if we're always trying to make things more efficient, we're more and more busy and rushed. It never seems to accomplish its end,
Yes.
which means there's something else at play.
Yes. I can remember just in principle when self-checkout was first introduced at grocery stores. And I can remember my father joking about it because he would still go to the human being to be checked out. And at that time, it was still a pretty prominent option because his joke was that he was not going to check himself out of the grocery store because he already had a job. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, look, I got to come get the groceries, shop. And then you're asking me to check myself out, bag my own groceries, and leave. He says, well, what are you doing, right?
Yeah.
And what we forget, though, is that we were told that when self-checkout was introduced, it was going to be introduced so that food prices could be reduced. That's how they got us. Because there was a huge pushback on self-checkout. People are tired. They're going to grocery stores after work. It's not easy to walk through the store, remember, what do I have? What can I afford? Well, where are those discounts and stuff like that? To have to do all that and then check yourself out, back your own groceries and so on. But how they got us was that they said, we will reduce food prices. Well, guess what? Food prices have been reduced.
Yes, I don't remember that happening.
And so what we've done, to your point, Rachel, is we've added more work. So this is not introduced a convenience in terms of burden, but actually a further inconvenience, and not the inconvenience that would enhance virtue or allow for a flourishing of the human spirit, but where the human being seems to be almost in service to the machine, rather than the machine contributing to the well-being of the human family. And as we maybe address all these issues, the point I want to stress is AI and other technologies can be good when they serve and support the human life, human family. The problem is when they begin to supplant. That's what we're talking about. When suddenly our artists disappear, when our skills, our people with skills, our craftsmen disappear. I mean, nowadays, if you try to get something really done, like something really beautiful, like put up a nice brick half wall or something like that, you almost have to find someone that comes from a different country where those skills are still taught.
Right, and
it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, and people aren't used to paying for it as well. This is an interesting concept that's probably going to branch off into another discussion, but also people are like, whoa, that's expensive. And I'm like, expensive compared to what? Like, expensive is a comparative thing. Like, it's more expensive than I'm used to paying for. And yeah, some things are overpriced for real. But yeah, you're going to pay more for a handmade table than you are for, something from IKEA. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. And so I think readjusting your expectations in terms of the cost of things is also important in terms of
that. Exactly. It's expensive compared to cheap.
Yeah, compared to
Maybe you deserve more than cheap.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you for joining us today. If nothing else, we hope that maybe we've provoked a few thoughts, given some clarifications that can help. Remember, the gospel of Jesus Christ and the church are always in service to human dignity, to the human family, solidarity, to the development of our skills and talents that are given to us by God. So we're grateful that you have joined us today.
Save the artists. Join us next time.